Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. Gosh, I'm excited to be here with you today. My name is Art Burns, and this is the Showing Up to Life podcast, or Showing Up to Your Life podcast, whichever one you want to call it, podcast and YouTube channel. Right here we talk about general ideas, philosophies, understanding information about how the nervous system kind of reacts to stressors and how we can learn how to regulate ourselves. And what I talk about here a lot is practices that we can use to regulate ourselves, right? And what I have found in my journey, and I've told you all lots of personal stories, and I'm going to tell another story today, actually. But in my journey, what I have found is that the key to everything, right? And I mean everything, is the ability to regulate oneself. Like, seriously, it all starts there, right? Because when we are regulated, right, that's when we are making sound decisions. That's when we are seeing all of the potential options. We are seeing clearly. We are unbiased or less biased, as unbiased as we can be at any given time. You know, our least biased state is in that state of regulation, right? And this is where we are able to really be present with life, right? Where we are really able to show up to this thing called life, right? And that doesn't mean just get through the days, right? I can tell you I spent 20 years just getting through the days, right? That is not what life is about. I can promise you that, right? There is so much out there that we can, so much happiness, so much satisfaction, so much, excitement, so much beauty is out there in the world, right? But if we're just in this state of hyper arousal and we're not able to regulate ourselves, well, then we miss it all. We just cannot be there for it. You can't show up if you're not regulated. So that's what we talk about in this podcast and YouTube channel. Now, there's lots of different ways to achieve regulation. And one of the things you're going to hear me talk about a lot in these coming weeks and months and everything, and I've already talked about it a lot too, is how regulation depends on the integration of one's brain, okay? As you've heard me talk about, and I'll just do a real quick thing here, and then we'll maybe do a full brain, a more in-depth brain, not full, but more in-depth brain science episode in the near future. But what happens is your brain is made up of several different sort of regions, right? You have the right brain and the left brain, and each one of those has sort of a top, a middle, and a lower brain, right? And all these different areas of the brain do lots of different things, right? But the thing is that recent research has shown, especially with Dr. Dan Siegel and many of the people that he's worked with and he references, he's not really a researcher, but he talks about how important and how foundational to our well-being, how foundational to our regulation this integration of our brain really is, right? Now, the good news is that all the practices that I talk about here, every single one, from journaling to meditation to compassion practices to the pause to, all of the practices that I talk about here, every single one of them is driving us towards integration, which means driving us towards the ability to regulate ourselves, okay? So this is all it is. And that's and even better, right? The practices are so, just blessedly simple that it's just like, sometimes I ask myself, how is it that anybody is not doing these practices in the world, because they are really so simple. The only thing that is as complicated as it ever needs to get is just at any time, whether you're in a formal meditation or in just washing the dishes or doing something around your house, focusing on one thing. In meditation, that would be the breath. If you're washing the dishes, it would be the dishes. Brushing your teeth, it's the sound of brushing your teeth, something like that, right? Focusing on that one object. And every time you realize that your mind has wandered off and you started thinking about something, you just return to that object. Okay, that is as complicated as this work ever has to get. And I'm going to tell you another thing. If everybody were able to spend 20 minutes a day doing meditation, then I would not have to coach anybody more than like 2 or 3 weeks, ever, right? But the thing is that not everybody can do that amount of meditation, right? And so that's why we have a wide variety of different practices that we can use to integrate into your life, because that's the way it works, right? I mean, if it was that easy to just spend 20 minutes, and I mean, sure, it's simple to spend 20 minutes, but we have kids, we have jobs, we have, social engagements, we have hobbies, we have all this stuff in our lives. 20 minutes is a big piece of real estate for a lot of people in terms of their time, right? So that's where I come into the practices that we can weave into our daily lives, okay? And so we're not adding even any time, really, more than a couple of minutes maybe, and a couple of minutes anybody can spare, right? So if you're interested in any of these practices, there's a link in the description to book a call with me. Now, this call is completely free. I've already paid for it, okay? So it's there with your name on it. All you got to do is click the link, put in your name, your email address, answer a couple of questions, and now you're booked for a coaching session. And during that coaching session, you and I can talk about some of these practices that we can weave into your life so that you can start to build that integration in your brain and start to gain the power of regulation. And then you just get to watch your life change in so many amazing, beautiful ways. So let me tell you a story about my own experience, right? Now, I have made no secret of the fact that I have had a very tumultuous past when it comes to my relationship with my anger, okay? Pardon me. They're cutting grass outside, so my allergies are like off the hook right now. But so I got a little tickle in my throat. So pardon me for a little sip of tea. So anger was my go-to, right? I've also made no secret of the fact that I grew up with an abusive set of parents, right? My father was very emotionally abusive. My mother was very physically abusive. Okay. Both of them were filled with anger, right? Anger was the ether of our family, right? It was the air that we breathed, right? It was baked in, right? Anger. Just when something happened, you got angry. That's just how we did it. And of course, that's something that I practiced my entire childhood into my early adolescence and into my early adulthood. And then, of course, that's my go-to, right? Anytime in my adult life that things have gotten difficult or strenuous or panicky or stressed or whatever, anger is where I go, right? That's me. Many people, it's maybe more of a shame is where they go, or maybe it's more of a some other emotion, fear, or there's a lot, depending on your life and how you were brought up, you have a different thing that you go to. Maybe yours is anger, just like mine. In any case, the point I'm trying to make is that one way in which the anger really showed itself, like almost every time, was when I was driving. Okay, like road rage was like, oh my gosh, I was like Mr. Road Rage, right? I think I told you the story about Christmas morning one year, driving we had, my father-in-law came up to our house for Christmas Eve, and we all got really just stupidly drunk. And then the next morning, my wife and I had to drive over to my parents' house, which was like a 3-hour drive. And I had gotten a coffee from the only, there's like a gas station open in town for, run by people from the Middle East who don't celebrate Christmas. And so that was the only coffee I could get, which was horrible, horrible coffee. But I needed that coffee so bad. But, 2 miles later, I get on the highway, or I'm trying to get on the highway in the car, there's hardly anybody on the road, but this car couldn't even move over. He had to make me put on my brakes and wait. And that was unacceptable to me. So what I did was I pulled up alongside of the guy, actually pulled up behind him and rode his bumper until he moved over so that I could pull over so that my driver's side was next to his car. And I literally took this cup of coffee and threw it right at his windshield. Okay, that's how little it used to take for me to get ragey on the road, right? Yes, there's been times where pull over, let's bump chests. Frankly, I'm lucky to be alive. I am, and I realize that all the time, okay? But here's the thing. right? The reason I'm telling you this story, right, is because I want to paint the picture of how volatile, how trigger, or what do they say, hair trigger, my temper was, especially when I was on the road. Right, that was the one place where always. Now it showed up plenty of other places in my life, of course, but on the road, that was where it was always there. It was as ubiquitous as the radio, right? Was my road rage, right? We had the radio, we had the road rage. You had four wheels, a radio, and road rage. That was everything all the time, right? And so I tell that story, I give you that background because I want to talk about the power of how these practices really work. Okay, now, as I've told you, it was about 10 years ago that I started a transformation of myself, right? I don't know if I mentioned this the other day, but I don't think I did because I was still on my vacation. But on Monday, which was the 16th, I believe, I think it was Monday, either Monday or Tuesday, August 16th marked 10 years since I had my last drink, right? As ubiquitous as road rage was for me, drinking was even more so, right? Drinking was something that I've been using as a maladaptive coping mechanism literally since I was like 16, 17 years old, right? And I'm 52, well, at the time I was 42 years old. So you're talking about good 26 years or something like that of drinking literally daily. Right. I mean, sure, I'd take some days off where I was just too hungover, that kind of thing. But for the most part, 30 years or whatever, 25 years, just daily drinking and drinking like a lot. Right. And so 10 years ago, I gave up drinking. That was kind of the start of this sort of process. I mean, you could maybe go back a couple of years earlier because that was when my daughter was born. My first child was born 12 years ago. So I think really that was the real start, which is very common. People have children and they realize like, wow, I got to change. I got to do something different, right? But of course, for me, I had a lot of things to change. And I changed them. And I'm really proud of myself for doing that. I gave up this just atrocious alcoholism. I changed my diet to a completely plant-based diet, and over the course of a year and a half, I lost 100 pounds of body weight, at least 100 pounds. I'm not real good at like weighing myself beforehand, but I know it was at least 100, probably like 110. And along the way, in the same mix of a few years, right, I found mindfulness practices and compassion practices, and I started to practice those. But as I've told you, the first couple of years wasn't really good about practicing constantly, right? It really wasn't. I was more about like, okay, just be present, just, let go, just, doing it all here, right? And circumstances of my life allowed that to happen for a few months, and it felt great and everything. But then, of course, a stressor came and something popped up, and it just, drove me right back to that reactive, automatic behavior, right? So that's when I realized that practice was really, really, really important. So that's going back probably about maybe 6 years now, okay? And even then, in the first year or so, it was, touch and go. But let's say like, so the story that I'm telling you now is about 5 years ago, right? 5 years ago, we had just moved to Denver, maybe 4.5, 5, yeah, some of that, 4.5, 5 years ago, right? We moved to Denver from New York. We sold everything, sold our house, sold our business, had a yard sale, got rid of as much stuff as we could. And we literally just packed up the family and moved to this, amazing Colorado, and just an adventure of a lifetime, which was amazing, right? Of course, it was a big adjustment though too, right? So life was not like just super smooth and easy. It was some adjustments, right? And so there was one day very shortly after we had moved to Denver, and at this time, right, maybe a few months after we moved to Denver, and during those few months, like right after we had gotten to Denver, I took on a sort of different level of my practice. Okay. And what I was doing with this practice was I was doing for 20 minutes, at least once a day, most of the time 2 to 3 times a day. What I was doing is for 20 minutes at a time, I was doing the compassion practice that I think I've told all of you about, right? You picture 3 different people in turn, one person easy to love, somebody who's just positive person in your life, right? Another person's a neutral person, the letter carrier, a clerk in a store you don't know, just somebody in the world you don't know, good or bad, a neutral person, right? And then somebody who is difficult, somebody who has done you harm, somebody who has done other people harm, somebody who it's hard to offer compassion towards, right? And what you do, it's each one of these people in turn, you picture the first person, and then you repeat 6 different phrases to the person, right? The phrases are, may you be well, may you be free from suffering, may you be free from fear and insecurity, may you be forgiven for your mistakes and your misdeeds, may you feel loved, may you be happy. Okay? Those 6 phrases over and over and over, right? So you say it like once or 2 or 3 times for the first person, and picture the second person, say it 2 or 3 times, picture the third person, say it 2 or 3 times, and then you pick 3 more people, and then 3 more people, and then 3 more people, and keep going until the timer goes off. My friends, this was an amazing practice. And I actually, just this morning, last night when I was planning this out, it's not in the black book. I don't even have the black book with me. It's upstairs somewhere, or maybe back here. But anyway, in my bag somewhere. But anyway, I was just thinking, like, what am I going to talk about tomorrow? And then I realized this story, because I had just told the story. I was like, this is a perfect one, And so this morning I started doing the practice again, and it feels so good because it does 2 different things, this practice, okay? You see, first it works as a compassion practice, which, according to Dr. Dan Siegel himself, I was on a call with him a couple of weeks ago, and he directly answered my question when I said, does practicing compassion build integration in your brain? He said yes. Okay, so that's one thing that it does. Of course, compassion practices also open your heart and make you just make it a little easier to accept people and to be patient and forgiving for people, right? But then it's also working like a mantra, almost like a transcendental meditation kind of thing, especially when you're doing 20 minutes of repeating those phrases over and over and over again. I remember at that time, I had such a clarity in my mind, like I could, and that's what I was thinking about this morning. Like, I got to get back to that. Or last night I was thinking, I got to get back to that, because there was I remember a few moments where I was like, I have never been this clear in my mind before. And that, of course, is a sign of the integration that was happening, right? So anyway, the point is that I've been doing this practice for maybe, I don't know, a couple of months, maybe, right? I didn't write on any of this down, so I don't know the exact chronology, but I'm going to say maybe a month or 2, right, that I was doing this practice. I've been practicing mindfulness in general for a little longer than that, a year or 2, but longer than that. But for, a couple of months, I've been doing this really heavy duty compassion practice, right? Which was just benefiting me in so many amazing ways. Okay. So I think I've told you this story before, but it's really kind of worth repeating, because it's something amazing happens with this practice. So, and note, I mean, we're not talking about 20 years, right? We're talking about like a year and a half of mindfulness practices and like a couple of months of this hardcore compassion practice, right? That's all we're talking about. We're not talking about most of someone's life here, right? Like less than 2 years we're talking, right? So one day I was out driving over on Lincoln Avenue in downtown Denver, right? Like that's it's like Broadway and Lincoln are like the two very big streets, right? One way. Lincoln Avenue is 5 lanes. When you come up to 6th Avenue, which is another very big street here in Denver, there's 2 lanes that need to turn to the right, and there's 3 lanes that are going to go straight, right? Except buses. Buses are traveling in those right turn lanes, but they're allowed to go straight. There was no bus anywhere near me. Okay. Now, in between the 2 lanes that are going to the right and the 3 lanes that are going straight, there's like an extra wide line, right? Like a white line going in where they separate, like, it's like almost like a median, right? But there's nothing built there. It's just a white line. But this white line is almost as wide as I am on my bicycle, right? So there I am riding on that line in my bicycle, right? And there's not a lot of cars around. Right. So I know now you're talking to somebody who is a former bike messenger from New York City. Right. So I know how to ride in traffic. I know that, it's about how fast you're going and making sure that you're not in anybody's way, making sure that nobody's going to turn into you. It's very simple, but if you practice it enough, you get really good at it. And I have it as sort of an innate, an implicit kind of skill. Right. So I know for a fact, like there was plenty of room to go around me. You know, there was no way that I was in anybody's way. I know that. Okay. And despite this, a person came up behind my bicycle, maybe like 2 feet behind my back tire, and just laying on his horn, right? Just blaring his horn. Now, first of all, there's nothing more scary than that. I mean, not nothing, but it's one of the most scary things scary circumstances you can find yourself, right? Because you're literally so vulnerable. I mean, if that guy punches gas, like I'm dead, right? Like I'm crippled. I'm dead. I'm screwed. You know, like I am very, very vulnerable at that point. No matter what helmet I have on, you know, which I do. I always wear a helmet because I've taken some spills and cracked helmets. I'm like, ooh, that would have been my sense of taste right there. Yikes, you know. Yeah. So now normally, right? I mean, I told you. I mean, just somebody not like letting me in on I-84 in Fishkill was enough to get me to throw a 20-ounce cup of hot coffee at a guy's car, right? So you can imagine that somebody blaring his horn at me like that. I mean, he would have at least, I mean, at the very, very least, he would have gotten me turned around and given him the finger, right? Like that's at very least. Like seriously, I was thinking about this last night as I was preparing to tell this story, and I was like, you know, in most circumstances, I would have taken my bicycle lock, right, one of those big U locks, and I probably would have tried to throw it at his windshield. You know, like that's the kind of thing that I would have done, right? And now I know that you probably think that this story is gonna, you know, end with me saying like, Art, remember your compassion. Art, stay calm. Art, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. But you'd be wrong. That is nothing what it was like. Okay, there is absolutely nothing that it was like. And I, to this day, am still, even though I've seen this happen hundreds more times, I'm still just blown away at how this all unfolded. Okay, like the second he started blaring on that horn, like there was no time in between him blowing on that horn and me. And again, it wasn't a voice where I had to like make myself say something. The inner voice like told me, right? I didn't tell myself. My inner voice told me exactly this. I promise you, this is exactly what came into my mind. Like as a thought, just boom. Gosh, how much pain this person must be in to go out of his way to honk at me like this when I'm not even really in his way. That is literally the thought that just generated into my mind. Not because I made it happen, not because I reminded myself, not because I needed to, you know, pins and needles, needles and pins like Ralph Cramden and count to 10, right? It was a direct emotional response. I'm going to say that again. It was a direct emotional response for me to say, oh my gosh, the pain that this person must be enduring to be so angry at me for doing nothing to him. I didn't care about like nothing other than that. That was it. But in that, you know, in that same notion though was included, I don't remember if this came up as words or not, but the feeling was that I hope this guy feels better. Like I really do. I wish for this guy not to feel the same way that he's feeling right now. Because this poor dude, I mean, he's got to be suffering so much. And I hope that he stops suffering like that. So the point that I'm making here, folks, okay, yes, I was doing 20 minutes a day, some days 60 minutes a day, right? So yes, I was definitely, because my idea was to become a coach and to start teaching this to people. So I needed to be the guy that did as much as you could possibly do, right? Without living on a monastery or something, right? So yes, I was doing a lot of practice, but it wasn't like 10 hours a day or anything, right? It wasn't like that. And so my point is that it doesn't take that long to get this. And then the other thing about the timing of the practice, from everything I've learned and everything I know about the neuroscience and the neuroscience behind how meditation works, it's like I don't remember I think the mathematical law is commutability, I believe. where, if you say 20 minutes a day for a month is the same thing as 5 minutes a day for 4 months, right? So you just, it's a mathematical, relationship, right? So if you can't do 20 minutes a day, you can only do 5 minutes a day. Well, then instead of, like it took me a year, so it'll take you 4 years at 5 minutes a day. But still, I mean, that's not that bad for 5 minutes a day, right? But the point is, it's not like you have to wait 4 years for anything to happen. Like, stuff happens 2 weeks in, right? Like, that was not the first time I had seen the evidence of my mindfulness and the benefit. I told you, people were walking up to me saying, what did you do to yourself? You're so different. You're what's going on with you? Right? But it became, again, the important thing to understand here is that it became an emotional response. A boom, 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 boom. It just happened. Just like that. So, again, one of the reasons I say this is because a lot of times I think people feel that, well, I'm going to have to do these practices for 20 years and I'm going to, it's going to be an endless, lifelong thing. And it is a lifelong process, because if I stopped practicing today, it might take maybe 2 years or 3. I don't even know if I could do it at this point because I'm just so automatically mindful, right? But if, say, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, if I stopped practicing, I would have slid back eventually. It might have taken a year or two, but I would have slid back and become the same reactive, road ragey Art that I had always been, angry Art, as one of my employees named an espresso drink after me, the Angry Art. She didn't last that long. She didn't like me that much, so it was okay. But anyway, so the point is that these practices, it's really a very interesting and beautiful thing that happened with these practices, okay? Because, yes, it is work, and yes, you got to do it, you do. But the thing is, like I told you, when I was doing those compassion practices, there were moments where I literally felt that, like, my mind has never been as clear in my entire life as it is right now. Right? So along the way, you get plenty of little treats and goodies and beautiful, like, amazing improvements, right? But at a certain point, it becomes really like automatic. And then at a certain point, the practices do become automatic. But you're talking about, as science has shown us, it's like 10,000, 20,000 hours of practice. Once you get to that point, you're good, right? You don't ever have to practice again. I'll let you do the math as to how many years of 5 minutes a day that might be. But you don't have to get to that level, right? Like, that's not necessary in order for this work to truly improve your life. I just had another person who just went through a 12-week program. And oh my gosh, the things she just told them in this review, are just amazing. In 12 weeks. 12 weeks, just turned everything around. And that's just one story out of so many I have, there's just, and that's one of the things I just love about my job, not just making these little videos here and stuff, but also just watching people transform and people, really just reclaim their lives and become the people, the husbands, the wives, the mothers, the fathers, the employees, the entrepreneurs, the firemen, the ambulance drivers, that to become these things that they always wanted to be, right? To do those things as well as they want to do them, right? So if you're a parent, you're going to be a better parent. If you're an ambulance driver, you're going to be a better ambulance driver. If you're a citizen of the world, you're going to be a more engaged and contributing member of the world, citizen of the world. So there's no point at which these practices don't help. So folks, just start practicing, all right? Now listen, again, like I told you, you don't have to sit there and do 20 minutes. I have lots of practices that you can weave into your life. The stuff that you're already doing, right? Like, driving to work, we can meditate there. Doing the dishes, we can work there. Brushing your teeth, yes. Showering, yes. All those places, right? And I can help you do that. But you gotta reach out. That's the only way it's gonna happen. All right, everybody. Hope you've enjoyed this podcast and YouTube channel today. And I'll be back again tomorrow. And I wish you well, and I'll see you then. Take care.